Let's try using multiple textures. Here, I will be explaining how to use multiple textures at once, including video textures. In the first section, I will be explaining about adding node trees and multiple textures in addition to how to show textures. In the middle section, I will explain how to add video textures and about the unique setting of video textures. In the final section, I will be explaining about how to use the key entry feature for multiple textures and how to make a texture change animation. I will be explaining with version 2.5.0 of the user interface. First section. Let's add a node tree and textures. This explanation is about textures, so I will start with a simple plane surface. This plane has a UV map for texture mapping. Let's add a material. This will allow us to use nodes. For this, we will use the regular Blender method. Press the plus button on the right of the material slot. The material has now been added. Next, we will make it possible to use nodes. Press the new button on the bottom of the material slot. With this, we can now use nodes. Next, let's add multiple texture nodes. You can see the pastel action add-on beneath the material slot. Press the Add Multiple Texture Node 3 button. After doing so, a submenu showing Temper 1 level will appear. Select it. In the material slot, if the active material name is Pastel Action Node 3, then you have done the above correctly. With this, multiple texture nodes have been added. Next, let's add a texture. You can do so with the regular Blender method. Select the texture from the Property panel. There is a texture user slot beneath the Property panel. Let's try pressing it. You can see lots of texture users. With pastel texture, you can add a base layer texture or a video texture. Whatever you choose will become the base texture. The textures that you add on top of the base texture will be the first layer texture and second layer texture and so on. Let's try adding a base texture. Scroll down the texture user slot. You'll find base layer in the submenu. Select it. Now you can add a base texture. Use the regular Blender feature at the bottom to select texture. We'll select the Use Multiple Textures texture. The base texture has been successfully added. Next, we will add another on top, so select Textures again. Please use a PNG with an alpha channel, a pin file, for extra textures. Let's select the first layer's texture. You can add up to 10 total textures to each layer. You can select these 10 textures in the areas labeled 1, 2, etc. Let's select a texture. This is the first texture for the first layer, so select First Layer 1. We will add a texture called 1. The texture has been added. However, it is not being shown on the material surface. I will explain about this later. First, let's finish adding the textures. Add 2 to 2, 1 in the first layer. Add 3 to 1 in the second layer. Add 4 to 2 in the second layer. With this, adding textures is finished. Next, I'll explain how to show the textures. In Pastel Action, when you add a texture, only the base layer is automatically shown. When adding multiple textures, first add them and then you can select which texture to show. We just added some textures, so using the Pastel Action add-on, click on the Change Textures button. A menu will appear, so select Layer Shown. Firstly, let's show the first layer's texture. Select the first layer. A submenu will appear with the textures that we just added. 1 and 2 are options, so select 1. You can see that number 1 texture is being shown on top of the base texture. Next, let's add the second layer's texture. Press the Change Texture button. Select the second layer from the menu. Now let's add number 3. Select 3 from the submenu. 3 is now shown on the plane surface. With this, on the plane surface is the base texture, texture number 1 and texture number 3 on top. This is all for the explanation of nodes trees and adding textures. Thank you for watching.